The New Frontier of Terror, a critical examination of weapons and the crisis of faith in modern society. In the annals of cinema, the human heart has always been the most fertile ground for terror. We have witnessed the monstrous spectacle, the visceral gore, and the jump-scare cheap trick. But I submit to you that the most potent fear is the one that forces us to question the sanity of our neighbor, and indeed, the very structure of our civilization. Today, we speak not merely of a film, but of a cinematic thesis, Weapons. This motion picture has been hailed by the British media as the year's foremost achievement, not for its gore, but for its genius. It dares to argue that the most devastating weapon is not steel or fire, but the erosion of human trust. How did the director, Zach Cregger, arrive at this harrowing conclusion? To understand the fear in Weapons, one must first comprehend the grand tradition of psychological horror that preceded it. The grand precedent, from the Gothic to the Freudian, a history of fear in cinema. To speak of psychological horror is to speak of a cinema where the monster resides not outside the window, but behind the eyes. The initial architects of terror, the purveyors of Gothic horror, relied on the uncanny, the familiar made strange. Think of the brooding architecture, the oppressive atmosphere of a decaying home, settings that mirrored the inner, tormented landscape of the characters. We see this in films like Robert Wise's 1963 masterpiece, The Haunting, where the house itself, Hill House, is a living, breathing malignancy, fueled entirely by the characters' anxieties. The fear is internal. The audience is left perpetually questioning, is this real, or is it madness? But the true shift arrived with the mid-20th century and the popularization of Freudian psychology. The new enemy was the unconscious mind. Alfred Hitchcock became its supreme commander. His 1960 opus, Psycho, shattered the conventions of cinema, making the ordinary man, the troubled, timid motel proprietor, the source of unspeakable horror. The fear of the stranger was replaced by the fear of the neighbor. This template was refined in the late 60s and 70s by figures like Roman Polanski. In Rosemary's Baby, the dread is entirely derived from a conspiracy that is so mundane, so domestic, that it becomes terrifying. The heroine is not chased by a beast. She is slowly, subtly gaslit by her husband and her elderly neighbors. The terror is one of social isolation and creeping paranoia, where every benevolent gesture is revealed to be a link in a chain of malevolence. Weapons inherits this direct lineage. The disappearing children are the inciting trauma, but the film's true concern is what happens after. How the social fabric frays, how the community turns its gaze of accusation onto itself, and how fast a seemingly tranquil neighborhood can devolve into a state of civilized anarchy. Cregger's blueprint, the trauma of the collective, Weapons and the rejection of the supernatural. The genius of Weapons lies in its deliberate rejection of the supernatural monster. Director Cregger, following the success of his previous work, Barbarian, has doubled down on the idea that human malice is sufficient. In the film, the disappearance is the catalyst for collective trauma. The children are gone, the vacuum of information is instantly filled by suspicion. And where does that suspicion land? Not on a shadowy outsider, but on the schoolteacher, Justin Gandy. The genius here is sociological. Cregger holds a mirror to our modern, digital society. When faced with an unsolvable, devastating mystery, the first impulse is not unity, but the frantic search for a domestic scapegoat. The psychological horror is watching a community, built on trust and PTA meetings, begin to devour itself. The camera becomes a crucial witness to this internal warfare. As we discussed in our brief archival preview, Cregger utilizes an unnerving, almost invasive style. He shows us shots that are too long, spaces that are too empty, perspectives that are too low. These techniques do not show us a ghost, they show us the absence of safety. The atmosphere whispers, "You are not secure." The danger is already inside. The viewer is positioned as the perpetual outsider, observing the breakdown. The film argues that the true, terrifying legacy of the event is the collapse of empathy, the final consequence of the collective trauma. When trust is extinguished, all that remains is the darkness of our own negative speculation. The Rashomon effect and the viewer's role. To elevate the psychological torment, Cregger employs a narrative strategy that is profoundly unsettling, the Rashomon effect. Named after the 1950 Japanese film by Akira Kurosawa, this effect presents the central event, the missing children, from multiple, equally believable, yet contradictory viewpoints. We hear the mother's account, the police's theory, the teacher's memory, and each narrative is a finely woven tapestry of half-truth and self-justification. The immediate consequence of this narrative ambiguity is that the responsibility for the truth is violently transferred to you, the spectator. In conventional mystery, the director provides the answer. Here, Kreger refuses to grant that comfort. He challenges the audience's very mechanism of discernment. Whom do you choose to believe? Whose vulnerability seems most authentic? Whose version of the truth satisfies your own psychological need for closure? The film thus evolves beyond a simple story into a test of human bias and vulnerability. This technique is a cornerstone of advanced psychological horror because it ensures that the film's influence does not end when the screen fades to black. The questions linger. The seeds of doubt are sown in your own mind, long after you have left the viewing platform. A final verdict on the contemporary masterpiece. The scoring of suspicion and conclusion. The final, vital component of this cinematic achievement is its oral architecture. The sound design in Weapons is not background noise, it is the narrator of dread. It is a whispered chorus of anxiety, a constant, low-grade hum of impending doom that affects the viewer on an almost subconscious level. It is the perfect sonic accompaniment to a plot driven by unspoken fears. This score is a masterclass in using sound to manipulate emotion, proving that the most terrifying sound is often not a shriek, but the absence of silence. Weapons is, by all measures, a challenging work. It is slow where other films are fast. It is ambiguous where others are definitive. But in its refusal to conform, it achieves a kind of terrifying honesty. It strips away the comforting fantasy of the supernatural and confronts us with the ultimate, chilling reality. Our greatest fears are not fantastical. They are human-made, social, and entirely plausible. It is a profound and unsettling experience that will remain with you. Seek it out, but prepare yourself. It is a mirror, and what you see reflected may be the true terror. We have journeyed through the history of psychological terror to understand the lineage of this formidable film. Now, the inquiry turns to you. Have you experienced the disquieting dread of Weapons? Do you agree that the erosion of trust is cinema's new, most potent weapon? Share your thoughts, your fears, and your theories in the comments section below. If you appreciate this deep dive into the historical underpinnings of modern horror, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. We endeavor to offer such archival examinations of cinema's most compelling works every week. Press the like button to signal your engagement, and the notification bell to ensure you do not miss our next historical treatise on the art of film. Thank you for joining this exploration. Until the next deep dive, remain vigilant, and trust your instincts.